The Women's March. Once again, the chaos continues. As many of you know by now, because I've done many videos about this, they are in a scandal having to do with anti-Semitism. Apparently, some of the founders went on The View and still refused to disavow Farrakhan. They said things like, oh, I don't agree with things he says, and repeatedly just did not disavow. What does that say? The group's anti-Semitic, man, come on. At this point, anybody who's actually defending the Women's March, you're a liar or you're anti-Semite, and this is the reason. BuzzFeed News reports 2020 Democrats are avoiding the Women's March. The organization that runs the National March, which was a celebrated cause when it launched in 2017, has faced charges of anti-Semitism. I'll tell you what's gonna happen. As soon as there is a watershed moment of people saying, no, this is anti-Semitic and I will not support it, then you're going to see all the Democrats coming out and going, oh, I didn't go. I don't support it either. No one, not even the SPLC, wants to disavow this anti-Semitic march because no one else is, and they're trying to, they want to put their feet in the water, make sure it's warm, right? So what they're doing now is Democrats are saying, oh, we're not going, oh, it's just some other thing. The SPLC says, oh, we've got other obligations. They're all slowly pulling away. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. We've already seen actor Deborah Messing, we've already seen Alyssa Milano condemn the Women's March, okay? You'd think by now that would be enough for politicians to be like, I disavow too. No, because they're worried there are still organizations supporting them. Because this is what they do. They claim to be not racist, but in reality, the only reason that they claim to actually support things is because they're part of the hive. They're just going to do what the other people tell them to do, and until there's a massive moment of someone powerful standing up right now and demanding a disavowal, people are just going to quietly back off and say, oh, no, not me. Let's read the story. As organizers from the National Women's March face claims of anti-Semitism, Democrats eyeing bids for the White House appear to be steering clear of the once-celebrated annual event, with no announced plans to attend this Saturday's march and few candidates willing to weigh in on the controversy. When reached this week, 7 prominent Democratic hopefuls did not respond to questions about the march. 4 said they would be traveling elsewhere or had no plans to attend. 2 of the Democrats, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Housing Secretary Julian Castro, have announced exploratory committees to begin funding a presidential campaign. The rest, former Vice President Biden, Cory Booker, Sherrod Brown, Tulsi Gabbard, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, and Bernie Sanders are all considering campaigns. The DNC, the party's central arm in Washington, D.C., also has no plans to partner with the Women's March. A DNC official said the party has partnered with Women's March organizers in the past on various projects, but has never been a sponsor of the national event. Walk away. Back away, not today, disco lady. The DNC, Simpsons reference. People probably were confused with it. The DNC stands in solidarity with all those fighting for women's rights and holding the Trump administration and Republican lawmakers across the country accountable, the official added. This year, a slew of groups have decided not to partner with the Women's March, including the Southern Poverty Law Center and Emily's List. I am no fan of the SPLC, but I will point out, here's what I would prefer to see, okay? Respect for the SPLC pulling away from this group, but they didn't issue a statement about the anti-Semitism, okay? If the SPLC wants to claim the Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, they're a hate group, you have to make a point that the people running the Women's March have called the Nation of Islam, called Louis Farrakhan the greatest of all time, and have not disavowed him. In fact, still insisting he's done good things. Okay, look, if you're leading this massive organization that's a racial supremacist, ethno-nationalist, anti-Semitic group, it's just literally, I'm going to piss off the alt-right. What's the difference between the Women's March and an alt-right event? And comment below, let me know what you think. Obviously, there's a difference between white identity and anti-white identity, but the point I'm making is you've got people who are advocating for an ethno-nationalist organization who are also anti-Semites. You want to rag on everybody and call everybody alt-right? Well, what are you doing? It's ridiculous. So they go on to say, the annual gathering began 2 years ago on January 21st, 2017, the day after President Donald Trump's inauguration, when millions of women marched across the country in protest, a galvanizing moment for the Democratic Party that became a stand-in for the so-called resistance and a precursor to the Me Too movement that set off an urgent national conversation around workplace misconduct, harassment, and abuses of power. The marches over the last 2 years launched local chapters across the country, a loosely organized network of chapters headed by the more prominent national organizers, similar to other large movements of the 21st century. Gillibrand, The New York senator who has been an outspoken voice in the Me Too movement and would make women's issues a centerpiece of her possible presidential campaign, once called the 2017 march the most inspiring and transformational moment I have ever witnessed in politics. Keep in mind, Gillibrand is saying that of an anti-Semitic march. She's talking about an organization of people that are anti-Semites. Okay? The movement happened, she wrote in a Time magazine tribute to the march, because 4 extraordinary women, Tamika Mallory, anti-Semite, Bob Bland, anti-Semite, Carmen Perez, anti-Semite, and Linda Sarsour, anti-Semite, had the courage to take on something big, important, and urgent and never give up. Is that anti-Semitism? Is that what you're talking about? They had the courage to take on praising the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan, and you praised them? Maybe, if you want to criticize PewDiePie, and I'm not talking about Gillibrand, if the media wants to claim, oh, PewDiePie recommended a YouTube channel, he should have watched the YouTube channel. Are you kidding me? How about you go and criticize the Women's March, nobody vetted the fact that these are basically anti-Semites leading this march who have still, come on. It's clearly lopsided. We know it's lopsided. And why aren't people disavowing when we know? The New York Times. Thank you, New York Times. Thank you, Tablet Magazine. You've done some great journalism. New York Times corroborated Tablet Magazine. Please. Please. Where are the journalists? Where's The Verge, Vox, all these other outlets bringing this up and saying it's time to condemn? Now, BuzzFeed, people criticize me for this. I think BuzzFeed tends to do a good job. Tends to. There's a difference between BuzzFeed News and BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed is the weird garbage articles, I don't know, top 10 lists of ice cream cones for the progressive birthday or whatever. BuzzFeed News isn't that bad. They're not perfect. They're left, of course, but this is good. Like, they're writing about the anti-Semitism. They're highlighting this, okay? That's a good thing. Being honest. Now that same group of leadership is facing charges of anti-Semitism, allegations that broke into public view over the past year after co-founder Tamika Mallory attended the Nation of Islam's annual Savior's Day at the event. Wait, what was this? In the past year. At the event, Farrakhan made a series of anti-Semitic and anti-gay remarks. Following widespread criticism of her attendance at the event, the Women's March put out a statement that included Mr. Farrakhan's statements about Jewish, queer, and trans people are not aligned with the Women's March unity principles. But to the frustration of people inside and outside the organization, the group did not explicitly condemn Farrakhan. In an interview with The Atlantic, Mallory described the work of the Nation of Islam in rehabilitating struggling communities as central to her continued support of the group. Full stop. Continued support of anti-Semites, the Nation of Islam. It's hypocrisy. And it's funny because on Twitter today, someone was like, Tim, you claim to be a leftist, but all you do is criticize the left. It's like, okay, yeah, No, I criticize this part of the left. The people who have poisoned the side I have been on almost all of basically my entire life. Okay? The things that I've fought for, poisoned by these people who claim to fight for unity principles and continue to support an anti-Semitic organization who call Jewish people termites. Please, I do not believe it for a moment that you actually care about any of these people. These are what people refer to as the default liberals. You're not a liberal. You're a liar. You pretend to support a group because you want to fit in. That's all you're doing. City-dwelling young hipsters, okay, living off your parents. You go to college and you pretend to care about this stuff. Please. When you go out in the streets to march behind these people, you think I actually believe you when you say you're fighting for these issues? When Antifa is screaming racial slurs in Portland, you think I'm going to believe that you actually care about these issues? No, you are poison. You are bad people who spit on the idea of what the left actually is. And of course, let me say this. There's a lot of people on the left who disagree with what the left really is. That's fine. The point I'm making is, one thing most of us can agree on, even people on the right, war is bad. For the most part, unless you're an authoritarian. We don't like war, we like freedom of speech, and we want respect and dignity for people, and the only real divide between left and right is the idea of a competitive market or a cooperative market. I lean more towards cooperation, and that's fine. I still believe in competition for sure. And people on the right tend to agree more with competition and less with cooperation. I'm not saying they don't believe in cooperation. It's just a scale, right? When you're center, you're like 50-50, a little bit of both. I lean a little bit more towards social programs and cooperations. Hard thing to figure out. But what happens when these people claim to be on my side and agree with me, and then stand up and start screaming insane nonsense? I'll give you a really good example of how this works. A really good example that shows the problem. South Park had an episode where they wanted to change the flag because the flag depicted two white men hanging a black man. And Jimbo, I don't know if you're a fan of South Park, but basically Jimbo is Stan, one of the main characters' uncle is his uncle, and he says, we should keep the flag the same to protect our heritage. And Chef, who's black, says, no, it's racist. The KKK shows up and says, keep the flag the same, it's heritage. So Jimbo and his friend, I don't know his friend's name, show up to the KKK rally and convince them to actually flip their position. He says, how about the KKK claims to want to change the flag because people will just, whatever you say, they'll disagree with. That way the flag will stay the same. And they go, oh, that's a good point. Basically, black propaganda. That's what it's called. Black propaganda is when you pretend to be the other side. When Tamika Mallory and, Common President, all of these people or whatever, who was it? It was, Tamika Mallory gave an interview with The Atlantic, refuses to disavow Farrakhan, and continues to support the group. So what happens then when those fringe anti-Semitic weirdos are leading one of the most prominent left-wing organizations in the world, okay? They're standing on my side advocating for positions, and you're going to get, for one, Jewish people saying, no thank you, this is why you're all crazy. It's why you're going to see people posting things saying liberalism is a mental disorder or something, okay? You've got people now disavowing the entirety of what the left stands for, because these people will not be disavowed. So I'm gonna end by saying this. If you stand behind them, you're a bad person, okay? They're only to a certain extent am I willing to accept ignorance as an excuse, right? If the media won't give that same benefit to people who are unaffiliated, like if they're gonna claim PewDiePie is a Nazi simply because he saw a YouTube video, then why would I give you the benefit when you're literally marching behind these people? I don't see PewDiePie marching behind these people. He's just talking about memes on the internet. You still don't like that? Well, then I'm going to put the mirror in your direction so you can take a good hard look at you standing behind this. But anyway, look, I always go on angry rants about this because I cannot stand it. I'm going to end by making the main point. The Democrats are pulling back. It's slow, but maybe it's only a matter of time before they actually make a statement about it. Anyway, stick around. I got more videos coming up in a few minutes.